100% Filipino po.
So 100% zero pagdating po sa US. Tama
Opo.
po ba yon?
Opo, Your Honor.
Maraming salamat po, Sir Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Salo. Thank you for that. Honorable Salo, just one question before you leave. So ang sinasabi mo, on your interpretation, a dual citizen is different from a citizen on a strict definition of citizenship.
Precisely, Mr. Chair.
Thank
Ang
you.
sinasabi ko po dito, at ito yung tinuturo ko rin sa mga estudyante ko noon, basically, a strict interpretation of this particular provision of the Constitution, yung citizen lang.
Thank
Kasi
you.
there are 4 categories actually. Hindi siya pumapasok dun sa dual or dun sa multiple citizenship. Kasi
Thank you.
pwede rin siyang maging stateless later on. But
Thank you.
yung
Thank you, Honorable
Constitution,
Salo.
when it talks about citizens, it actually talks about 100%, no questions, no ifs and buts.
Thank you, Honorable Salo. And I think that was also supported by the DOJ. We now proceed to the Honorable Barsaga. The Honorable Barsaga is recognized.
Maraming salamat, Ginoong Chairman. Nais ko muling tanungin si Mr. Gabriel Lopez. Good afternoon, Mr. Lopez.
Magandang hapon po, Pangulong Barsaga.
Pasensya na kayo. Muli po ako magtatanong para malinawan ang issue na napapaloob sa pinag-uusapan ng Kongreso ngayon. Sa pagsisimula ng aking tanong, nais ko lang linawin ang punto na binigay ni Congresswoman Bautista. Sa kanyang katanungan, sinabi niyo na mayroon kayong ari-arian sa Amerika, yung TFC, the Filipino Channel. Tama po ba?
Opo, Your Honor.
Bukod sa the Filipino Channel, in your personal capacity, meron ba rin kayong ari-arian sa Amerika, real, personal properties, or even shares of stock?
Opo, Your Honor.
At sinabi niyo rin kanina, yung TFC, nagbabayad kayo ng taxes sa Amerika. Tama po ba?
Opo, Your Honor.
Yung bang mga properties niyo, bukod sa TFC, na pag-aari niyong sarili, meron ba itong income sa bansang Amerika?
Opo, Your Honor.
At siguro, nagbabayad rin kayo ng mga taxes sa Amerika.
Opo, Your Honor.
Well, sapagkat kayo ay isang Pilipino, sa ating National Internal Revenue Code, dapat bayaran nyo hindi lamang ang inyong kinikita sa bansang Pilipinas, kundi ang inyong kinikita sa bansang Amerika. Tama po
Your
ba
Honor,
to?
Your Honor, my understanding of the tax laws of the Philippines is that you're only taxed on the compensation that you generate in the Philippines. America po is the only country that taxes you regardless of where you earn the money. In the Philippines, my understanding of the tax laws, you're only taxed for the revenues you earn in the Philippines.
Well, hindi ko na po hahabaan ang puntong to. Ang pagkakaalam ko lamang bilang isang certified public accountant na nakalagay sa probisyon ng National Internal Revenue Code na ang Pilipino will be taxed. Magbabayad siya ng buwis sa lahat ng kanyang income sa Pilipinas and even outside of the Philippines. And perhaps your lawyer can make a position paper regarding this legal aspect. At pangalawa, base sa inyong sagot, sa mga taxes na binabayad nyo sa Amerika, hindi kasama ang inyong kinikita sa bansang Pilipinas. Tama po ba?
Kasama po, Your Honor.
Ulitin ko po. Sa Amerika, nagbabayad kayo ng buwis. Sa pagbabayad nyo ba ng buwis sa Amerika, ibinabayad nyo rin ang binabayad nyo ba rin ng buwis sa Amerika yung kinikita nyo sa bansang Pilipinas? Income earned within America and outside of America.
Yes, Your Honor. The U.S. tax laws will tax you for your worldwide income.
For
Your worldwide income po.
worldwide income.
Correct. Regardless of where you earn the money.
Pero sa Pilipinas naman, ang binabayaran nyo lamang ay yung tax, yung income na inyong kinikita sa bansang Pilipinas, hindi kasama ang taxes, hindi nyo binabayaran ang taxes para sa inyong income na inyong kinikita sa labas ng Pilipinas.
Opo, Your Honor.
Well, I think in both cases, you have to pay. And perhaps that would be the job of Attorney Ayo Bautista. Sinabi niyo rin kanina na kayo ay bumoto sa halalan sa Amerika noong 2016.
Opo,
At yung
Your Honor.
pong halalan sa Amerika noong 2016 ay presidential elections. Tama po ba?
Opo, Your Honor.
And under the laws of America, ang halalan nila ay ikalawang Lunes ng Nobyembre. Tama po ba kung inyong natatandaan or you cannot remember?
I believe it is in November. You're right. Your
Okay.
Honor.
At noong 2016, bagamat mayroong halalan sa pagkapangulo sa Amerika, mayroon ding halalan sa pagkapangulo sa bansang Pilipinas. Tama po ba?
Opo, Your Honor.
Bumoto ba kayo sa halalan sa pagkapangulo ng Pilipinas noong 2016?
Yes, Your Honor.
At sinabi niyo rin na bumoto kayo noong 2019 dito sa bansang Pilipinas.
Yes, Your Honor.
At bukod noong 2016, ano pa yung mga previous elections na kayo ay bumoto dito sa bansang Pilipinas?
As far as I can recall, since I came back in 1986, I have voted in all the elections.
From 1986 up to the present.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, maraming salamat for that information. And just for the record, isang beses kayong bumoto sa Amerika noong 2016.
Opo, Your Honor.
Binanggit nyo rin kanina na kayo ay mayroong dalawang passport hanggang sa kasalukuyan. Tama po ba?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ang isang passport ay ang Philippine passport at ang pangalawang passport ay USA passport. Tama po ba?
Yes, Your Honor.
At pag bumibiyahe kayo sa Amerika, ang inyong ginagamit ay USA passport.
Yes, Your Honor.
At pag bumibiyahe naman kayo sa Europa, ang sabi nyo, ginagamit nyo ang US passport sapagkat hindi na kailangan ang visa sa Europa kung ang passport na inyong gagamitin ay US passport. Tama po ba?
Yes, Your Honor.
At sinabi nyo rin na yung inyong Philippine passport ginagamit nyo sa inyong pamamasyal o pagpunta sa mga ASEAN nations sapagkat hindi nire-require ng ASEAN nations ang visa kung Philippine passport ang inyong ginagamit.
Opo, Your Honor.
At sa pagtatanong ni Congressman Remulla, nang kayo ay bumiyahe sa Amerika, bumiyahe kayo sa Japan, ang ginamit yung passport ay US passport. Sapagkat ang Japanese government hindi nagre-require ng visa kung ang passport na inyong ginagamit ay US passport. Tama po ba?
Opo, Your Honor.
Kayo po ba ay nakapunta na sa bansang China?
Yes, Your Honor. Matagal na po.
Matagal na. At nung nagpunta kayo sa bansang China, anong passport ang inyong ginamit? Philippine passport or US passport?
Hindi ko po maalala, Your Honor. I would have to look through my records.
Well, sabi nyo kanina, you are using US passport because it is more convenient. And you are
Yes.
using Philippine passport in countries where it would be more convenient in using Philippine passport katulad ng mga ASEAN nations. Sa inyong pagtingin, kung kayo ay bumiyahe sa China, what passport would be convenient? The US passport or the Philippine passport?
Hindi ko na maalala, Your Honor. That was over
Hindi
30
nyo na
years
maala.
ago.
Maraming salamat.
Excuse me po, Congressman PD Barsaga. Tatlong congressman po ang nagbigay ng kanilang oras para sa inyo. Iyan po ay mga oras ni Congressman Bambol Tolentino, Congressman Eric Yap, at Deputy Speaker Dan Fernandez. You have additional 15 minutes po. Maraming salamat po.
Sa mga kinatawan na nagbigay ng kanilang oras para sa akin. Noong huling pagtatanong ko, binanggit nyo sa edad na 1 taong gulang, kayo ay bumalik sa Pilipinas at inyo ring sinabi na marami sa inyong taon ay ginugol nyo sa bansang Pilipinas. Dito kayo nag-aral sa bansang Pilipinas. Dito ba rin kayo nag-aral ng inyong elementarya at high school sa bansang Pilipinas?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ano pong paaralan?
Ateneo po, Your Honor.
Ateneo de Manila. Elementary at ang high school ay Ateneo de Manila rin.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Noong huli nating pagpupulong, hiningi ng ating committee ang records nyo ng pagbibiyahe sa labas ng Pilipinas. At base sa data na binigay sa amin ng Bureau of Immigration, and I think the Bureau of Immigration is watching our proceedings, ang kanilang record na binigay ay mula noong 1993 hanggang 2020. Isa-isa ko pong tiningnan ang record na binigay ng National Housing at na binigay ng Bureau of Immigration, lumabas po rito 316 times, 316 na beses na kayo ay bumiyahe sa bansang Pilipinas mula noong 1993 hanggang 2020. Mula noong 1993 hanggang 2001, ang inyong ginamit ay US passport. At alam naman po namin ang dahilan kung bakit US passport ang inyong ginamit, sapagkat noong panahon na yon ay wala pa kayong Philippine passport. Tama po ba?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Pangalawa, mula noong 1993 hanggang 2001, 125 beses kayong lumabas ng Pilipinas na ang inyong gamit ay US passport base sa records na binigay sa amin ng Bureau of Immigration.
Yes, well, Your Honor, I have no way of knowing. But
Okay.
you're right, Your Honor.
At mula naman noong 2002 hanggang 2020, 313 beses kayo lumabas ng bansang Pilipinas. Sa 313 beses niyong paglabas ng Pilipinas, ginamit nyo ang Philippine passport only 122 times. Samantalang yung balancing 191 sa inyong pagbiyahe, ang inyong ginamit ay US passport. Sinabi nyo, halos matanda lang ako sa inyo ng 2 taong gulang. Sa ating elementarya at sa ating high school, siguro natatandaan nyo na araw-araw tayo ay kumakanta ng lupang hinirang at nanunumpa tayo sa ating watawat. Yun tinatawag natin panatang makabayan. Naalala nyo po ba yun? O hindi nire-require yun ng Ateneo de Manila?
No, it is required, but my memory is probably not as good as yours, Your Honor.
It is required, but probably, pwede pong pakiulit ang inyong sagot.
Your memory might be a lot better than mine, Your Honor.
Pero nakakaroon tayo ng pagkanta ng Bayang Magiliw, pati na ang pagtulaan ng panatang makabayan.
Opo.
Hindi ko na gagawin, itatanong sa inyo, sapagkat marami tang taon ang nakakaraan. Pero ang nais ko lamang pong ipaalala na sa huli ng ating panata, isa sa isip natin na ako ay isang Pilipino sa isip, sa salita at sa gawa. At yun po ang aming pag-uusapan dito sa Kongreso sa pagpapasya kung kayo ay bibigyan ng bagong prangkisa. Kung kayo sa inyong isip, salita at sa gawa at base na sa inyong sagot ay naging kayong isang tunay na Pilipino. Mr. Chairman, although I have 15 minutes, manifestation na lamang po ang aking gagawin. We know for a fact that the records of our proceedings are official. As a matter of fact, under the rules of evidence, our courts can take judicial notice of these proceedings. And therefore, in view of the importance and transcendental issue which we are discussing right now, based on the provisions of the Constitution, I would like to emphasize certain things. And I have furnished the COMSEC the things which I want to emphasize regarding the constitutional provision. Marami pong salamat, Ginoong Lopez.
Opo, Your Honor.
Maraming salamat po, Congressman.
Manifestation.
Please do so, Congressman Barsaga.
I have forwarded a copy to the COMSEC for their approval and perusal as early as 9 o'clock this morning.
May ipinasa po ba, COMSEC? May ipinasa po ba si Congressman P.D. Barsaga na manifestation kaninang alas 11 ng umaga?
Ayun na po. Okay. Una-una, sa ating mga mamamayan, ang pinag-uusapan natin dito practically ay ang mga sumusunod. Number 1, citizenship. Number 2, dual citizenship. Number 3, dual allegiance. And number 4, renunciation. Pag sinabi po nating citizenship, ito po yung pagkamamamayan ng isang tao. Base po sa ating diskusyon, sa pagkamamamayan, ang mamamayan po ni Mr. Lopez ay dalawa. Isa siyang Pilipino at isa siyang Amerikano. At ito po ang nakalagay sa ating saligang batas na paulit-ulit ng sinasabi ng ating mga kasamahan, pati na ng mga sangay ng ating pamahalaan, katulad ng DOJ, pati na ng Securities and Exchange Commission. Section 11, Paragraph 1, the ownership and management of mass media shall be limited to citizens of the Philippines or to corporations, cooperatives, or associations wholly owned and managed by such citizen. Malinaw na malinaw po na itinatadhana ng ating saligang batas ng pag-aari ng mass media ay dapat sa Filipino citizens 100%. Pangalawa, nais ko pong bigyan diin. Next slide, please. Yung kasunod sana. Okay. Ay, lumampas ata tayo. Lumampas po tayo. Medyo lumampas. And this is very important. Yung pang-isa. Yung bago mag-section 11, paragraph 2.
Ano po ba yung hinahanap nyo, Congressman PD? Based on the deliberations.
No. Section 11, Article 6 is the only provision. You
Ayan
nasa
po.
taas. Is the only provision in the 1987 Constitution that requires 100% Filipino.
Ayan na po,
ownership.
nasa screen na po.
Okay. So sa madaling sabi, yung Section 11, Article 6, na nire-require ang 100% capitalization ng Pilipino ay ito lamang ang tanging provision sa Constitution na mayroong requirement na 100%. Yung advertising, katulad ng aking ipinakita sa screen, paragraph 2, 70% lamang ang requirement. When it comes to development of natural resources, ang requirement lamang ay 60%, and when it comes to public utility, katulad ng mga Meralco, etc., 60% lamang. At siguro nagtatanong tayo, bakit sa mass media ang ginawa ng ating mga delegado sa 1987 Constitution, nirequire nilang 100%. At kung tayo po ay magre-research sa deliberation ng Constitutional Commission, hindi naman po mahirap malaman ang kasagutan. At ito po ang kasagutan. Next slide, please. Based on the deliberations, Commissioner Jose Noliedo, which every lawyer knows, reason out why 100% Filipino ownership is required in the operation of telecommunications and mass media. At ito po ang dahilan na binigay ni Attorney Noliedo. At babasahin ko po. Ito ang sabi niya. While we consider the 60-40 ratio as applicable to public utilities in general, we are making an exception with respect to commercial telecommunications, taking into account that telecommunications involve more seriously the national interest, particularly the national security. So we feel that more Filipinos should have control over commercial telecommunication. Ang sabi ni Noliedo, na sinang-ayon na naman ng mga nakakarami sa Constitutional Commission, mahalaga ang telecommunications for national interest, especially for national security. Kaya kinakailangan 100% Pilipino. At meron pa rin po tayong isang probisyon sa ating saligang batas na binabanggit ng ating mga kasamahan. At ito po ay ang Section 5 ng Article 4. Dual allegiance of citizens is inimical to national interest and shall be dealt with by law. Pag sinabi nating dual allegiance, ang pinag-uusapan po ay ang katapatan ng isang mamamayan. Kapag ikaw ay dual citizen, meron kang dual allegiance. Ang katapatan mo ay sa dalawang bansa. Katulad ni Mr. Lopez, katapatan niya sa bansang Pilipinas at sa bansang Amerika. Although ang sinasabi lagi ni Mr. Lopez, 100% siya Pilipino. At ano ang dahilan kung bakit sinabi na ang dual allegiance ay inimical, makakasama sa interes na nasyonal? At ito po ang sagot ni Concon Delegate Blas Ople. In dual allegiance, there can be malice or an insidious threat to our sovereignty and security. Kung dalawa ang katapatan ng isang mamamayan, may pagkakataon na baging siya ay isang threat sa ating national interest, national security. At ito pa rin po ang sinabi ni Ginoong Blas Ople. He further added that where Filipino children born in the United States, katulad ni Mr. Lopez, for example, because of the Jus Soli doctrine, there have to grow up having in effect dual citizenship. Dalawa ang kanyang pagkamamamayan, although upon the attainment of maturity, that dilemma if dual allegiance exists, can actually be overcome by an election by this person as to whether to become a Filipino or American citizenship. Lahat ng isyung pinag-uusapan natin dito ay anticipated ng mga framers ng ating 87 Constitution. At meron pang isang dahilan na binigay si Delegate Villacorta. Next slide, please. Ayan. On the other hand, Delegate Dr. Wilfredo Villacorta said, why do we have to convince our colleagues that singular allegiance to the Republic of the Philippines is as fundamental as the civil rights of citizens? It is part of obligation of every citizen to render allegiance only to one country. Obligasyon ng bawat mamamayan na kinakailangan isa lamang ang kanyang katapatan sa isang bansa, at sa ating mga Filipino citizens, ang ating katapatan ay dapat lamang sa bansang Pilipinas at hindi sa ibang bansa. Maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat po sa iyong manifestation, Congressman Barsaga. Meron pang natirang 1 minuto si Congressman Barsaga. Baka
We'll
gusto
give
mo pang
it to the next
gamitin.
interpolator, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you, Congressman Barsaga. Next to interpolate is our good Congressman, Edsel Lagman. Congressman Lagman, you're now recognized at binigyan ka po ng additional na 1 minute ni Congressman PD Barsaga. Maraming salamat po.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Joint Chairman, I am not going to make an interpolation anymore in the second round. I will make a summation of the issues on the Philippine citizenship issue with respect to Mr. Gabi Lopez. Number one, when the 1935, 1973, and 1987 constitutions were drafted and ratified, the concept and fact of some Filipinos having dual citizenships were already in existence and known. More particularly, joint Filipino and American citizenships due to the concurrence of the doctrines of jus sanguinis and jus soli. With respect to the requirement of Filipino capitalization, management, and ownership of corporations, including those on mass media to the tune of 100%, the Constitution does not distinguish between a Filipino of single citizenship and a Filipino of dual citizenship. It is axiomatic that if the law or the Constitution does not distinguish, no distinction is allowed. Consequently, a Filipino with dual citizenship like Mr. Gabi Lopez is indubitably qualified to own and manage a mass media corporation like ABS-CBN. Verily, dual citizens are 100% Filipino. No amount of contrary opinion by members of the Constitutional Commission would diminish this import, because settled is the rule that opinions of the drafters of the Constitution are not controlling. Number two, under Commonwealth Act number 63 of 1936, Republic Act number 8171 of 1935, and Republic Act number 9225 of 2003, issuance and possession of a foreign passport and participating in the election of a foreign country are not among the grounds for losing Philippine citizenship. They are simply attributes of dual citizenship. If possessing and using a foreign passport does not amount to renunciation of Philippine citizenship, with more reason, the application in any form whatsoever for the issuance of a foreign passport is not a renunciation of Philippine citizenship. 3. The recognition of Philippine citizenship accorded to Mr. Gabi Lopez in 2002 was a confirmation of his being a Filipino citizen at birth, having been born of a Filipino father and also of a Filipino mother. The recognition process was not a naturalization proceeding. It was neither a perfection of his being a natural-born Filipino. Any act which Mr. Gabi Lopez was required to perform, or any document which he was required to submit in relation to his application for recognition of his Philippine citizenship does not deter from his being a natural-born Filipino citizen. 4. Any passage of time before Mr. Gabi Lopez applied for recognition of his Philippine citizenship, which recognition to my mind is not even mandatory and indispensable, does not militate against his being a natural-born Filipino. Likewise, the passage of time before he applied for a Philippine passport does not detract from his being a natural-born Filipino citizen. 5. Whether he acquired and owned properties as an American citizen in the United States or paid taxes in the U.S. Would be completely immaterial to the citizenship issue, because acquisition and ownership of property in a foreign country and paying taxes to a foreign government are not grounds for losing Philippine citizenship under our laws. 6. What is prescribed is dual allegiance, which is deemed inimical to national interest according to the Constitution. It is not dual citizenship which is prohibited, because dual citizenship is legitimate and legally recognized. 7. Absence of a Philippine birth certificate does not militate against one who is a natural-born Filipino citizen at birth because of Filipino parentage. And 8, jus sanguinis is not a mere legal fiction. Blood relation because of parentage cannot be fictionalized. The Filipino blood that runs in the veins of a natural-born Filipino is real, not fiction. Thank you, Joint Chairman.
Maraming salamat po sa inyong manifestation, Congressman Lagman. Next to interpellate is Congresswoman Garin. Congresswoman Garin, you're now recognized. You have the floor. Congresswoman Janet Garin, you're now recognized. Okay. Nawala yata sa Zoom si Congresswoman Janet. Next to interpellate is Vice Chairman, Congressman Mike Defensor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask the Department of Justice, ASEC-T, some questions, Mr. Chairman. First, Mr. Chairman, dito po sa ating mga batas, doon sa citizenship, pagka ikaw ay banyaga at gusto mong maging Filipino in Republic Act 9139, tama po ba, ASEC na kinakailangan Filipino citizen ka lang?
Your Honor, under our laws, a foreigner who wants to become Filipino one of the requirements for this foreigner is to take an oath to the Philippines. And part of the language of that oath is a renunciation of his other citizenship.
And it is correct, ASEC, thank you for that you only maintain one citizenship, which is the Filipino citizenship.
Your Honor, that really depends on the other nationality of this foreigner.
No, I'd like to correct you, ASEC. In
Yes, sir.
Republic Act 9139, you have to renounce your foreign citizenship and just be totally Filipino.
That's correct, Your Honor. From our perspective.
Yes, from our perspective, you have to be just one citizenship. And there have been Supreme Court cases based on this, na meron po mga ibang banyaga, nagpaka-Pilipino, tapos babalik sa pagkabanyaga, yan po ay tinatanggal natin sa pagka-citizenship. Tama po ba?
Tama po yun, Your Honor.
Ngayon po, pagka ako naman po ay isang Pilipino, nagtrabaho ako sa Estados Unidos, nag-naturalize ako doon, meron naman po tayong batas. Kanina po pinag-uusapan yan, yung RA 9225, na pagbalik ko dito, mag-a-allegiance ulit ako sa Pilipinas at magkakaroon po ako ng dual citizenship. Tama po ba?
Your Honor, RA 9225 presupposes that there was naturalization in another country by a natural-born Filipino.
Yes. So, ang ginagawa natin, ibinabalik natin yung kanyang pagka-Pilipino ulit. At gagawa na naman siya ng panunumpa na siya po ay isang Pilipino. Tama po ba?
Tama po yun for those who were naturalized prior to the effectivity of 9225.
Okay. Sinasabi ko po to, ASEC, kasi on the two separate cases, banyaga ka, bumalik ka rin, gusto mong maging Pilipino, magbibigay ka ng allegiance. Yun ang isang sample, Pilipino ka, yung isang batas po natin, Pilipino ka, pumunta ka ng ibang bansa, umuwi ka dito, magbibigay ka ng allegiance. Sa dalawa pang kasong to, kailangan talagang sumusumpa ang isang banyaga, pabalik sa Pilipinas, at yung pong Pilipino na gustong magbalik sa kanyang dating citizenship. Tama po ba?
Kami pong sumusumpa, Your Honor.
Ako.
Ngunit magkaiba po ang lingwahe doon sa sumpa. Doon sa sumpa ng banyaga na gusto maging Pilipino, maliwanag po doon sa sumpa na binebe-renounce niya ang kanyang pagkabanyaga.
Tama.
Doon sa sumpa ng dating Pilipino na gusto maging Pilipino ulit, wala pong pag-renounce ng kanyang foreign citizenship.
Agree po ako. Pero sa pareho pong panunumpa, nagbibigay siya sa allegiance sa Pilipinas.
Tama po yun, Your Honor.
Tama po. So, dito po sa dalawang kaso nito, kaya ko binanggit to, sa kadahilanan na kanina pa pinag-uusapan yung dual citizenship at dual allegiance. But in both cases on citizenship by a foreigner to become a Filipino or a former natural-born Filipino and to come back to become a Filipino, they both have to give an oath of allegiance. From the perspective of the Philippines, they have given their last allegiance to the Republic of the Philippines. Isn't that correct, ASEC?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Okay. Ngayon po, kanina po pinag-uusapan, sinasabi, legal, pwede, Pilipino. Ang tanong ko po sa inyo, ASEC, napag-usapan na po ba ang dual allegiance at dual citizenship sa Korte Suprema ng ating bansa? Hindi pa ho, di ba?
From my recollection, Your Honor, hindi
Wala.
pa napag-uusapan.
Opo. Pero napag-usapan na po ang dual allegiance. Doon po sa batas na binanggit ko, particular pa, and I will go more particularly, doon po sa ating batas sa Local Government Code, yung pong Local Government Code of 1991, na kung saan sinasabi niya, technically, pag nag-iba ka ng citizenship, nag-iba ka ng allegiance, hindi pwede.
Tama po yun, Your Honor. For election purposes, may definition po tayo ng dual allegiance.
So, ang existing lang po natin sa dual allegiance debate would be the case of the Local Government Code wherein marami pa nga hong kandidato, gumamit sila ng passport nila In fact, if I may cite the case, yung pong kay Makiling sa Lanao, na ang sinabi, yun ay pagpapakita na hindi niya totally ni-renounce ang kanyang American citizenship. Tama po ba?
Kailangan ko po ma-review yung kaso yun, Your Honor. Pasensya na po. Pero tama po kayo na pagdating sa paksa ng local elections, meron tayong batas at jurisprudence on dual allegiance.
If I may quote the particular decision, and this is by Justice Carpio, it is undisputed that Amado had to comply with the twin requirements of allegiance and renunciation. However, Arnaldo's use of his USA passport after the execution of his affidavit of renunciation constituted a restriction of his renunciation and led to his failure to comply with the requirement of renunciation at the time he filed his certificate of candidacy, so on and so forth. So, kaya ko to binabanggit po kasi yung pong sinasabi ninyo, sa DOJ na ho ako papasok, sabi ninyo, pag Filipino, pag dual citizen, natural born, Filipino citizen na. That is only an opinion of the DOJ. There is no decision yet in the Supreme Court as regards citizenship, dual citizenship, and dual allegiance. Is that not correct, Asekti?
There are some decisions from the Supreme Court on dual citizenship. Among these decisions are the same decisions that were discussed during the past few meetings, such as those decisions that talked about the U.S. passport. But when it goes specifically to dual allegiance, Your Honor, I have no recollection. I might have to look into more cases now, but for presently, wala po akong maisip.
Okay, so dual allegiance, there is none. Pag sabi niyo po sa dual citizenship, may decision na. I will go particularly on mass media. Is there already a decision on dual citizenship and mass media?
There is none, Your Honor.
There is none. So therefore, Your Honor, sabi po ng DOJ and all the other lawyers, of equal footing. Ang ibig kong sabihin, yung sinasabing iba, pwede. Ang sinasabi ng iba, hindi pwede. Hindi pa ito na desisyonan ng ating Korte Suprema. Ngayon, ang tanong ko po, pag sinabi po namin sa prangkisang to, bawal ang dual citizen, yung po ba ay magiging batas?
Sa prangkisa lang po, Your Honor? Or gagawa kayo ng general law talaga for...
It is only for the franchise that we will say, in this franchise, because it's mass media, we will not allow dual citizenship. Would that consider, and all other broadcast media, we will not allow dual citizenship. Would that be a law?
So Your Honor, you will create a general statute that will...
Yes, it will be a general. It will not
with...
be just for one particular company.
Your Honor, top of my head right now, I would think that that is within Congress's power.
Salamat po.
To provide for qualifications and restrictions to the grant of franchises.
Salamat po. Binanggit ko po ito kasi, Asekti, kasi po dun sa GMA 7 franchise, nilagay po namin dun, sa programming ninyo, dapat 10% ilagay ninyo yung mga programs ng gobyerno. Pero sinabi namin sa kanila, and that is part of what you're saying, that it should not be class legislation, that it should include all the other companies. But it is in their particular franchise. In the franchise of ABS-CBN, previous to this, we do not have it yet. But as we have committed, we can put it in the franchise of ABS-CBN. So what we're saying is that if we say dual citizenships are not allowed, then that would be the law. Correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, gusto ko lang pong itanong lang, Asekti, kasi nagkaroon po kayo ng recognition ng Filipino. How would you appreciate it if I present a document, for example, and I will not go to Mr. Gabi Lopez, let's say a Filipino-Chinese, no? Nagkaroon po ako ng document to say that this person is not only Filipino but is also Chinese. And now we are deciding on the Committee on Franchise because this does not only concern Mr. Gabi Lopez. This will be a continuing concern for us. Ano po dapat naming appreciation? Do we now say he is Filipino, he will be allowed, when we know for a fact that he is a dual citizen?
Your Honor, it's Congress's prerogative whether or not to grant a franchise to any.
Asikti, I'm asking you as a part of the Department of Justice and as a professor of law.
Yes.
And you are now, if you can please give us guidance, because this will be a continuing problem for us. Do we now allow dual citizens to have ownership, particular in mass media, where it is 100% Filipino?
Your Honor, from a legal perspective, from an interpretation of provisions of the Constitution and law that are relevant to nationalization of particular activities, Your Honor, it appears that there's no distinction. No distinction is made between purely Filipino citizens and dual citizenship, dual citizens when it comes to participation in these activities.
And well, I agree with you, Asikti. You're interpreting now the law. Ang tanong ko po ay ganito. Kung kamo po ina-advisean nyo sa Franchise Committee, sa Good Government Committee, at nakita po natin maraming prangkisa, at alam natin marami doon ay dual citizen, ano pong guidance ang bibigay nyo sa amin? And I'm not just talking of Filipino-Americans. You have Filipino-Chinese, you have Filipino-Japanese. How do we now treat this? When the spirit of the Constitution is supposed to be, sinasabi niya, Filipino talaga. Wala din naman siya sinabing dual eh. Filipino citizens.
Your Honor, when it comes to the grant of franchise, nationality of the applicant is only one criteria. There are many other criteria that Congress can look into, such as the financial capacity of the applicant, such as the track record, the need for this particular entity to be granted a franchise.
Asik,
So I believe, yes, Your Honor.
pakisagot naman po ng maayos yung
Sige.
tanong kasi simple lamang po Asik yung katanungan sa inyo.
Sige.
Kung kami po ay bibigyan nyo ng advice,
Yes, Your Honor.
na kung tayo-tayo lang naman ang nagkakarinigan dito, ano bang advice ang maibibigay nyo sa amin tungkol
Sige,
dyan sa usapin ng citizenship na yan, Asik? Simple lang po, Asik.
Your Honor, basta Pilipino, mag-qualify siya sa pagiging Pilipino, whether or not he is purely Filipino or Filipino by virtue of dual citizenship.
Okay, thank you
Sapat
for
na
that.
yun.
Thank you for that.
Combine na with other factors, kung meron mga nagtabla, kung may nagtabla na Pilipino lang at dual citizen, siguro maganda na ipasok doon yung mga ibang criteria para ma-determine nyo kung kanino kayo papanig.
Okay, so thank you for that. So ang sinasabi ng DOJ, well, I think that's just a personal question, opinion
Yes,
of
Your
the
Honor. Yes,
department. Na kung sa Filipino, so kung Filipino-Chinese, kung Filipino-American, Filipino-Japanese, sa Filipino pwede. Well, thank you for that opinion. Mr. Chairman, just like to go to Mr. Gabby Lopez. Mabilis lang po to. Mr. Gabby Lopez, narinig ko po, marami na tinanong, no, nagbabayad kayo ng taxes sa Pilipinas, bumoboto kayo sa Pilipinas at isang beses lang kayo bumoto ng 2016 sa Amerika. Ito nang po, Mr. Lopez, nagtataka ko. Meron po ba kayong Philippine driver's license?
Opo, Your Honor.
Po nakuha tong Philippine driver's license, Mr. Lopez?
I'm sorry, Your
What
Honor?
year, Mr. Gabby Lopez, were you able to avail of Philippine driver's license?
Yes, Your Honor.
What year, Mr. Lopez, would that be?
Hindi ko na maalala. Matagal ko na hindi ginagamit ang driver's license ko, kaya hindi ko maalala.
But even before, Mr. Lopez, you got your Philippine passport, ibig sabihin, bata pa ho kayo, mayroon na po kayong driver's license.
Siguro po.
Yung sa, Pilipinas,
Opo, Philippine driver's license.
ito po, Mr. Lopez, gusto ko lang pong tanongin, no, kasi nagtataka ako, nakakuha po kayo ng driver's license, pagkatapos po, nakapag-register kayo as a voter. Pero yung recognition po nakuha ninyo noong 2001. Kasi kung magre-register po ako sa COMELEC, I would need to show that I'm a Filipino. And then if you register po sa driver's license, pagka American ang pinakita nyo po na birth certificate, di ba ho, ang binibigay nila usually is the international driver's license. Meaning to say, meron po sana naging process na nagkaroon ng recognition. Hindi ko po naintindihan, Mr. Lopez. It's just a parang confusion on my part at medyo hindi ko po naintindihan yung naging prosesong yun.
I would have to review, Your Honor. I really don't recall what the process was and how I got the driver's license.
Before
Hindi
you continue your line of questioning, Congressman Vice Chairman Defensor, your time has already lapsed, so please wind up.
Sige po. So yung voters registration nyo po, meron po kayong voters ID. Alam nyo po kung paano yun nakuha?
Siguro po, I would have to review it. I would have to review, Your Honor.
Kasi po, alam nyo, Mr. Lopez, because you are Gabby Lopez, it's easy for you to get a license, people know you. But I'm thinking, there are many Filipino Americans. And before they get a driver's license, they go through a process. Before they register in the COMELEC, they go through a process. Pero parang dito ho, pagka kumuha kayong driver's license, bibigyan kayo kaagad. Pag nag-register kayo, pwede rin po kaagad. So, it's either we have a problem with our government agencies that, they just gave it out, o meron ho tayong nami-miss na process doon sa pagkakuha na po nitong mga lisensya at voters ID.
Well, I will review, Your Honor, and promise to submit memorandum on the process that I went through.
Thank
to
you.
get a driver's license and a voter's ID.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Isang taon po, nung high school po kayo sa Ateneo, pumasok po pa kayo sa PMT o yung Preparatory Military Training?
Hindi ko maalala po kung...
Nung panahon po natin, Honorable Alvarado, ROTC. Nung panahon nila Mr. Gabby Lopez, it was the PMT. This was previous to martial law.
Ang naalala ko, ROTC.
Did you attend ROTC, Mr. Lopez?
Parang hindi po.
And kaya po kayo hindi nag-ROTC because you were an American citizen or you are an American citizen?
No, I don't think that was the reason why, Your Honor.
Yes. Well, Mr. Lopez, if you can look into those records, because the PMT, ROTC, and CMT are required services in effect conscription by a Filipino. And
Yes, Your Honor. I will review it.
Yes, Mr. Lopez, because I saw your letter to the Bureau of Immigration and you mentioned you have not given service to the United States. I would like to know if you have fulfilled your services as a Filipino with our military training as required in the Philippines, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Your Honor.
Maraming salamat po, Mr. Lopez. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Salamat po.
Maraming salamat, Vice Chairman Mike Defensor. Next to interpellate is Congressman Mark Go. Okay. The last one to interpellate is Congressman Rufus Rodriguez. Congressman Rufus, you now have the floor.
Unmute. Okay. So, first of all, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to have the last questions. Mr. Chairman, I would like to go back to the only issue in this hearing that we have today and the last hearing. And the only issue, Mr. Chairman, is whether Mr. Gabby Lopez is a Filipino citizen or not. Because if he is a Filipino citizen, he can acquire stocks in ABS-CBN and he can be an officer of ABS-CBN. Everything else are academic discussions. And I will refer later on to these constitutional provisions, which to me are all academic because they're very clear. The only issue that we have, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to ask this now to the Bureau of Immigration. Our 1935 Constitution provides that Section 1, Article 14, 1935 Constitution, Section 1, Number 3, third paragraph. Those whose fathers are citizens of the Philippines are Filipinos. My question to the Bureau of Immigration, did you process the certificate of recognition, and can you confirm in these proceedings that all the requirements to prove that Mr. Gabi Lopez is a Filipino citizen and to be recognized by the Bureau of Immigration and affirmed by the Department of Justice have been complied with?
Mr.
The Bureau of
Lopez.
Immigration.
Mr. Lopez.
The question is to the Bureau of Immigration.
Okay, immigration. Do we have the Bureau of Immigration?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair,
Yes, Congressman Sarate.
before the Bureau of Immigration will give the answer, Congressman Mark Go just informed me that because he will no longer interpolate, that he will give his time to Congressman Rufus Rodriguez.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, I'm Attorney Alvin Alegre, Deputy Commissioner of the Bureau of Immigration. Based on the clarification by former Commissioner Congressman Rufus Rodriguez, Your Honor, the records of this case with the Bureau reflects that Mr. Gabi Lopez has submitted 8 documents, Mr. Chair, which will include the birth certificate of the parents of the subject in this case, the affidavit of Philippine citizenship, and the letter of request before the commissioner during that time, Mr. Chair. In compliance therewith, Your Honor, it was acted upon on April 25, 2001, and an order to recognize Mr. Gabi Lopez as Filipino citizen has been issued, and it was confirmed by the DOJ on August 6, 2001, Mr. Chairman.
So you can confirm, Honorable Deputy Commissioner, that all the requirements, including the proof that the parents, the father of Mr. Gabi Lopez was Filipino at the time of his birth, was filed with the Bureau of Immigration. Can you confirm that?
We confirm, Mr. Chair, based on the records existing before the Bureau of Immigration, that he has submitted if I may enumerate one by one, Mr. Chair.
No, just the birth, the citizenship of the father, the birth certificate of the father of Gabi Lopez. Was that submitted?
Yes, Mr. Chair, is the certificate of birth of his father, Mr. Eugenio Jr., indicating that his parents are Filipino citizens, as well as the certificate of birth of his mother, indicating that her parents are Filipino citizens.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. It is clear that therefore,
yes,
under Article 14, Article 4 of the Constitution of 1935, which governs the birth of Mr. Lopez, it is clear that they have submitted the proof that the father is a Filipino citizen, submitted and authenticated, approved by you, and then affirmed the Department of Justice. Do you confirm that this was therefore submitted and you have recognized Mr. Gabi Lopez as a Filipino citizen because his father is a Filipino?
Per records of the Bureau of Immigration, Mr. Chair, yes, we confirm that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I now call on the lawyer, Attorney Damaso, to answer the questions. Mr. Damaso, under your oath, did you submit all the requirements of the Bureau of Immigration, the Department of Justice, when Gabi Lopez applied for recognition as a Filipino in the year 2001?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. May I just enumerate for the record the documents that we submitted to the department, to the Bureau of Immigration in connection with the recognition for Philippine citizenship of Gabi Lopez. So the first that was required was the birth certificate of the applicant. So Gabi Lopez birth certificate, which was issued by Boston, Massachusetts. That's one. And then the birth certificate of the parents of Gabi Lopez, showing that they are both Filipino citizens at the time of birth of Gabi Lopez. The marriage contract of the parents of Gabi Lopez, which shows also that they are both Filipino citizens at the time that they got married. And then the applicant's passport. At the time, it was the U.S. passport that he submitted. And then the passport of both parents. So these were all submitted, and at the time of the submission, the Bureau of Immigration was very strict about the authenticity of all of these documents. That's why all the documents were duly authenticated, and all affidavits were notarized, and all documents emanating from the U.S. were duly authenticated likewise. So all of these documents duly authenticated, Your Honor.
So can you therefore now confirm under oath that you submitted all the requirements that were required of the certificate of recognition by the Bureau of Immigration and Department of Justice, and to your personal knowledge, these were submitted and they were all valid and authenticated documents, Attorney Damaso?
I confirm that, Your Honor, which is the reason why the application was approved by the Bureau of Immigration, and this was endorsed to the Department of Justice, which likewise confirmed the approval of the recognition.
Thank you very much, Attorney Damaso. My next question will now go to Undersecretary Professor T of the Department of Justice.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Director USEC T, Professor T, can you confirm that all the documents that were submitted by the applicant were duly received and approved by the Bureau of Immigration, including the birth certificate of the father of Gabi Lopez, the late Eugenio Lopez, to prove citizenship, and all of these were considered judiciously by the Department of Justice in the affirmation of the certificate of registration issued by the Bureau of Immigration.
Your Honor, that is correct. We received those documents that were enumerated. We affirmed them, and we also, in compliance with this committee's request, we also submitted the docket now, which includes those documents, to the committee last week.
So therefore, Mr. Gabi Lopez is in possession of identification certificate issued by the BI and affirmed by the Department of Justice that he is a Filipino citizen. Would you confirm that?
Your Honor, we confirm that he is a Filipino citizen.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, we have heard the lawyer who personally filed this application. We have heard the Bureau of Immigration. We have heard the Department of Justice. All of them, under oath, have confirmed that indeed Mr. Gabi Lopez is a Filipino citizen, and therefore he can now own shares of stock of ABS-CBN and can be an officer and manager of the ABS-CBN. I'll go now to the other collateral issues which are just straying from the main issue, because we don't want to also leave this even if they have nothing to do with the citizenship of Mr. Gabi Lopez. I'd like to go now, Mr. Chairman, to Article 4, citizenship of the 87 Constitution. It says, Section 5, dual allegiance of citizens is inimical to the national interest. This policy that is inimical in 1987 and shall be dealt with by law. My question now would now go, Mr. Chairman, to our Department of Justice Representative Professor T. Yes. ASEC T. This particular provision, do you know whether there has been a law that governs dual allegiance of citizens in our country? If you have an idea of this, a law that should deal with this particular Section 5 provision. Unmute, please. Unmute. Unmute.
DOJ.
Yeah,
DOJ.
Okay, unmuted, Your Honor. I apologize.
Okay.
Your Honor, I believe insofar as dual allegiance is concerned, there is a law for local elected officials, or at least law and jurisprudence for local elected officials.
Okay, so you're going to the local officials. So it is clear that there is no direct law that will deal on the matter of the general dual allegiance as stated by the Constitution. There's no general law on that, correct?
Yes, Your Honor. There's no general law on that.
But there was a law, 9225, correct? That indirectly answers this issue of dual allegiance. Do you agree with that?
If I recall correctly, RA 9225 does not mention the words dual allegiance.
Does not?
Does not mention dual allegiance. It deals more with dual nationality.
Yes. But we are saying that 9225 approved in 2005 after the Philippine 87 Constitution allows people who have lost citizenship, who have been naturalized, for example, in America, and has renounced Philippine citizenship. They have been allowed to reacquire Philippine citizenship by taking their oath and submitting the birth certificate that they were Filipinos at the time. Is that correct?
That is correct. And not only reacquire your honor, but they are also able to maintain their other nationality.
Thank you for that very clear explanation. So therefore, this being dual allegiance or dual citizenship has been in our legislature have been given a different treatment because while it says it's inimical to the national interest, it is a fact that we have passed in 2005 and to sign into law by the President that indeed even those already with nationalities of other countries can reacquire Philippine citizenship. Do you agree with that?
I agree, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. So therefore, the issue of this Section 7, Article 4 on citizenship about dual allegiance of citizens is inimical national interest has been quite answered in the opposite, that we believe that we should give back Philippine citizenship to those who have even already acquired another citizenship by returning to them the citizenship. Is that correct?
Your Honor, it would appear that because of RA 9225 as well as subsequent jurisprudence, that dual allegiance is not equated with dual nationality.
That's also true. But we are saying here that even if there may be an allegiance given to another country, because certainly in other countries require you to take an oath, especially when you become nationalized, naturalization. Then you say, yes. I renounce. So therefore, you have the allegiance that is there. But our law does not distinguish. In other words, we are saying that even those who have had allegiance given to another country can reacquire citizenship. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
That's correct. Thank you very much, Secretary. Assistant Secretary. Future Secretary. Okay. Now, so we go now, therefore, it's still part of this now is your answers to this. Another issue that has been brought about, which is a non-issue, like Section 5 on dual allegiance is a non-issue in the case of Mr. Gabriel. The other one is Section 11, Article 6, General Provisions, that says the ownership and management of mass media shall be limited to the citizens of the Philippines or to associates corporations managed wholly by the citizens. Now, are you aware, of course, Professor T, that the constitutional construction is that when the law is very clear, it has to be applied. Don't you agree with that, Maxim? That when
Yes, Your
you
Honor.
have to just apply it. Correct?
I agree, Your Honor.
Now, is it not very clear here that the provisions here, it says limited to citizens of the Philippines? It doesn't say, comma, that they should not be citizens of other countries. Can you see it very clearly here? It does not have any qualification of a citizenship that will own mass media. Do you agree with that, Professor T?
Your Honor, that is our present view, that the provisions of the Constitution on nationalization of certain enterprises do not distinguish between purely Filipino citizens and dual citizens.
That's correct. And of course, as professor, you would know because you come from our law school. That the maxim here, the Latin maxim is ubi lex non distinguit net nos distinguere debemos. Correct? That when the law does not distinguish, we should not distinguish. Do you agree with that maxim?
I agree, Your Honor.
And the law here does not distinguish. As long as you are a Filipino citizen, you can be an owner or a manager of a mass media. Is that correct, Undersecretary T?
Your Honor, we don't make a distinction between...
That's correct. And that's why your opinion is that this particular provision does not consider whether that Filipino citizen has another nationality, correct?
Your Honor, that's the present interpretation, Your Honor.
And even the most important provision on ownership of land, exclusively reserved for Filipinos. You have that opinion that you don't really go into the question of whether a Filipino citizen who is a clear citizen may not be allowed to own land if he is a national of another country. Is that correct, ASEC T?
That is correct, Your Honor.
So therefore, ASEC T, you are saying that there is no issue as far as Section 11 is concerned, in spite of others who would like to make a big issue out of nothing. Don't you agree with that?
Your Honor, not the present interpretation, but as Congressman Defensor pointed out, there is no Supreme Court decision yet on this matter. But the present interpretation would appear to be that there's no distinction between dual citizens and purely Filipino citizens for purposes of that provision.
And don't you agree?
Congressman Rodriguez, bago niyo po ipagpatuloy ang inyong katanungan, paalala lang po ng committee ito na tapos na po yung inyong 10 minuto, kaya po maaari na po kayo magsimulang matapos ang inyong katanungan. Maraming salamat po.
I thank you for giving me some consideration, Mr. Chairman. So my next point is that, therefore, as you have said, there is no Supreme Court decision interpreting this. And since we are in a state when there is no Supreme Court decision interpreting this, then we go to the layman's interpretation and your opinion of the Department of Justice and the opinion of the Securities and Exchange Commissioner by Commissioner Amatong, who also said that therefore there is no distinction. It is clear, as long as you are Filipino, you can own land. As long as you are Filipino, you can own media stocks. Can you confirm that, Secretary?
I'll confirm that, Your Honor.
Mr. Chairman, I therefore come out with my summation. My summation, Mr. Chairman, is that it is clear the only issue in this particular proceedings, as far as Mr. Gabi Lopez is concerned, is his citizenship. And this is confirmed by his lawyer, by the Bureau of Immigration, by the Department of Justice, by the SEC, that Gabi Lopez is 100% Filipino. And being 100% Filipino, he can own stocks in ABS-CBN and become a former president of this. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank Attorney Damaso, of course, Mr. Gabi Lopez. We also thank our Bureau of Immigration Commissioner, and then we have also ASEC-T, and the SEC. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the time given to me. I thank all the resource persons. Thank you, and good afternoon to all of us. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Maraming salamat, Congressman Rodriguez. Yes, Vice Chairman Remulla.
Mr. Chairman, can we be allowed to propound questions also to the DOJ in rebuttal to the questions of Attorney Rufus Rodriguez in this matter?
You're not allowed to do so at this point, Vice Chairman Remulla. But if you'll be pointing something that is out of order, then you may do so.
Well, Mr. Chairman, because what we're talking about here is legal interpretation, and that the Supreme Court has never decided on this matter. And all of the questions were, of course, Mr. Rodriguez, Honorable Rodriguez, is an author of the franchise law, so he is asking all the questions that would be supporting his bill, especially even to the extent that open-ended questions are being asked without regard to the fact that these matters have not been interpreted properly by the Supreme Court.
Yes, you can continue. You can continue.
Well, the question here is, what are the dual allegiance cases decided by the Supreme Court with regards to mass media, ASEC-T?
There are none, Your Honor.
There are none.
No dual allegiance cases yet insofar as mass media is concerned.
So the reference to land ownership, as stated by the Securities and Exchange Commission for Filipino citizens or dual citizens, cannot be applied to the issue of mass media. Can it be applied?
Your Honor,
Yes or no, ASEC? ASEC?
Okay, Your Honor.
Can this be applied to mass media, all these references to land ownership of the
opinion of
SEC?
the SEC is an opinion of the SEC. So at most it is persuasive. It has no stare decisis effect on us like a Supreme Court decision would. But at the same time, even if it pertained to the ownership of land, it can apply by analogy to mass media because it pertains to a similar situation, and that situation is nationalization of particular activities to Filipinos, and it goes into the definition, into the interpretation of what a Filipino is in those different constitutional provisions.
Yes, but in the drafting of the law and the passage of the law of dual citizenship in 2001, it was very clear from the deliberations of the Senate and from the letters, from the endorsements of the Executive Department, that the purpose for allowing dual citizens to own land was really the purpose for the dual citizenship law is to allow them to own land, but not mass media. Is that not there, ASEC-T?
I have to look up.
So you have not studied
I'm not aware of that.
You have not studied the law drafted in 2001 about how it came about, and it did not refer to anything about mass media.
I'm not sure about that particular statement, Your Honor.
Is there any other activity in the Constitution about requiring ownership wholly by Filipinos or to corporations 100% Filipino?
If I recall correctly, Your Honor, it seems to be mass media only.
Mass media only. So it is sui generis, a class on its own.
That can be said, Your Honor.
So all of these allusions or all of these references to land ownership and mass media, they're apples and oranges. They're not the same, are they?
That can be said, Your Honor. They're not the same in some ways, but they're also the same in other ways.
And if you go back again to the drafters of the Constitution, the reference to national security and mass media is very clear, isn't it, Mr. T?
I'll have to look it up, Your Honor.
Well, that was
But
the thesis
Congressman Remulla,
posted by...
please wind up.
that was the thesis posited by the Honorable P.D. Barsaga when he quoted
yes.
a constitutional commissioner, one was Noliedo and the other one I cannot recall right now, saying that there are national security implications in the ownership of mass media.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Your Honor.
Okay, that's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. As there are no members who wishes to interpolate on the first issue, tayo po ay nasa unang issue pa rin. We will now proceed with the second issue on ownership. Ang katanungan po ay whether or not ABS-CBN Corporation violated the constitutional requirement of 100% Filipino ownership and management for mass media when ABS-CBN sold Philippine depositary receipts to foreigners which allegedly allowed non-Filipinos to own ABS-CBN. Sa usaping ito po, bigyan lang natin ng linaw at para po sa kaalaman ng marami sa ating mga nanonood na sa Philippine Stock Exchange Glossary po ay meron pong nakalagay na definisyon ang PDRs o kaya ang Philippine Depositary Receipts. In the Philippines, a Philippine Depositary Receipt or PDR is defined as a security which grants the holder the right to the delivery of the sale of an underlying share. Sa Divina Law naman po, ang kanilang definisyon, PDRs are a kind of investment instrument that accrues interest and can be sold for profit. Individuals and corporations, regardless if a Filipino citizen or not, can invest in PDRs. Gamit po ang mga kaisipang ito ay sisimulan po natin ang mahabang linya ng ating mga kasama na magtatanong at ang kauna-unahan po sa mga magtatanong ay si Congresswoman Dindi Bautista. Congressman Bautista, you're now recognized. You have the floor.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chair, and thank you for recognizing me on the issue on the PDRs. So I just have a few questions to address to ABS-CBN, and anyone from ABS-CBN could answer this. Mr. Chair, may I ask if I could direct the questions directly to anyone from ABS-CBN who could answer my query?
Opo, Congresswoman Bautista, hanggat nasa inyo po ang floor, kayo po ang nasa inyo po ang direksyon kung kanino po kayo magtatanong at kung sino ang gusto niyong sumagot. Maraming salamat po.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, the issue on PDR is very complicated and it's somehow difficult to understand. So, I'd just like to have a few clarifications. To ABS-CBN, ABS-CBN Holdings Incorporated reserved 272 million of its shares in ABS-CBN Corporation and deposited them with the Philippine Central Depository Incorporated and issued a corresponding 272 PDRs representing each of those shares so that the PDRs could be freely traded instead of the actual shares. Anyone could ABS-CBN could give me a light. Is my understanding of the PDRs correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. That was in 1999. ABS Holdings issued 272 million PDRs covering 272 million.
Naririnig niyo po ba, Congresswoman Bautista?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I can hear him.
Maaari pong pakiulit po ang inyong sagot at pakilakasan po.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct, Mr. Chairman. In 1999, ABS-CBN Holdings issued 272 million PDRs covering 272 million ABS-CBN shares.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I'd just like to address the committee before I proceed with my questions. Has ABS-CBN provided this committee the actual PDRs that we've requested? Because based on the documents they have submitted to us, they have only given us a sample, and we want to see the actual PDRs which they've given.
Mr. Chairman, what we submitted was the PDR instrument, and attached to the PDR instrument is a sample of the PDR certificate.
Yes po. Pero I remember 2 hearings ago that the committee asked for an actual PDR because you submitted as the sample. So can we actually ask for the actual PDRs?
Mr. Chairman, there are several, we've issued several PDRs, but we could provide a sample.
Okay, thank you. Sir, with my second question, from your submissions, it seems that a foreigner holding a PDR could sell the PDR to a Filipino person or company, and that person or company could demand the delivery of the underlying ABS-CBN Corporation share. Is that correct, sir?
That is correct, ma'am.
So in other words, in addition to the income, the PDRs in effect allow a foreigner to buy and sell the underlying ABS-CBN Corporation shares.
Madam, Mr. Chairman, ma'am, the PDRs can only be sold to Filipinos and non-Filipinos, but the underlying shares can only be held by Filipinos.
Yes, sir, but can they sell the underlying share without the instruction of a PDR holder?
Madam, to be able, if a PDR holder exercises the PDRs, and he is a Filipino, he can get the shares. But if he's not a Filipino, the shares must be sold in the market, and the proceeds will be delivered to that non-Filipino PDR holder.
So, for the next question, does not receiving income and having the ability to direct the sale of shares essentially amount to ownership and control of the shares? So basically, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, can you actually sell something that you don't have ownership of?
The PDR is a financial instrument which gives the holder thereof a right to purchase the shares. If he is a Filipino, he also has a right to the proceeds of the sale of the shares if he's not a Filipino. So he can get the proceeds of the shares if it is sold once it is exercised.
So, okay. Sir, under your PDR, is it not stated, this is under the sample PDR that you submitted, is it not stated that both ABS-CBN Holdings and ABS-CBN Corporation are bound not to alter, modify, or otherwise change its articles of incorporation or bylaws or take any other action that would prejudice the rights of the PDR holders?
That's correct, madam.
And under the
Congresswoman
same PDR,
Dean
is it
Bautista?
not-
Congresswoman Dean
is it
Bautista?
Yes.
Yes.
sir.
Kindly emphasize that point because that would be very critical to the point you're raising.
Yes. So I will repeat my question and my statement. So under your PDR that you submitted, is it not stated that both ABS-CBN Holdings and ABS-CBN Corporation are not bound to alter, modify, or otherwise change its articles of incorporation or bylaws or take any other action that would prejudice the rights of the PDR holders?
Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman, can I check the PDR instrument?
Yes, please.
Mr. Chairman, based on the PDR instrument under Section 12.2, is the issuer that, or the ABS Holdings that undertook to cause the company not to alter, modify, or otherwise change its articles of incorporation. It's not ABS-CBN that did that, made that undertaking.
Okay. So under the same PDR, is it not the case that the issuer of the PDR bound itself to incur any obligation, debt, or liability that would materially or adversely affect its ability to meet its obligations under the PDR?
That's correct, ma'am.
Okay. So in effect, can we both say that both these stipulations on your PDR restrict ABS-CBN Holdings and ABS-CBN Corporation's management prerogative and show control?
Madam, our position is that these restrictions do not transfer ownership or control to the PDR holders.
Sir, because, and Mr. Chair, this is my final question also, because may I point out that based on the Court of Appeals ruling in Rappler Holdings Incorporated versus SEC, where these were almost the same stipulations similar to these were held as showing control. And Mr. Chair, that was my final question.
ABS-CBN, do you want to answer?
Our position, Madam, is that the provisions in the Rappler are different from our provisions.
Mr. Chair, may I request the representative from ABS-CBN to speak a little bit louder? Medyo mahina po yung
Opo,
sagot.
nirequest ko na po sa kanila kanina. At i-request ko po ulit ngayon, i-request po namin ulit na pakilakasan po tuwing sumasagot po kayo.
Mr. Chairman, our position is that the provisions in the Rappler PDRs are different from the provisions in the ABS PDRs with respect to that section 12.2.
Maraming salamat po. Maraming salamat, Congresswoman Dindy Bautista, sa iyong mga sunod-sunod na katanungan.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Congressman Defensor.
Mr. Chair, kasi po yung pinabanggit ni Congresswoman Bautista based on the Court of Appeals, yung pong provision na yun, binasa po din ng ABS-CBN yung provision nila. Sa akin kung palagay, parehong-pareho.
Yes.
Hindi ko napansin yung pagkakaiba. So kung mali lang pong mapaliwanag ng ABS-CBN, kasi parang hindi na klaro yun, ano yung pagkakaiba? Because the same conditions of the PDR of ABS-CBN as read by the ABS-CBN representative are the ones being mentioned by the Honorable Bautista. Iyan din po ang provision sa Rappler PDRs.
Maraming salamat po sa napakagandang manifestation ni Vice Chairman Defensor. Yes, Vice Chairman Remulla.
Mr. Chairman, the real question is how do you distinguish one and the other? Can we distinguish the Rappler PDR from the ABS-CBN PDR, and what are the differences between them?
Yan po ay ilan sa mga katanungan na paghandaan ng ABS-CBN. Gusto niyo na po ba sagutin ngayon? Yes, ABS-CBN.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our position, as correctly stated by the Corporate Secretary of ABS-CBN, is that there were material changes made to the Rappler PDR instrument. The main distinction was any change in the Rappler PDR required consultation with the PDR holders, and the original version required approval before such changes can be made. In our in the ABS-CBN model, there was no requirement. From the very beginning, there was an understanding that when the PDR issuer issued, they made a promise that they would not change the document.
Mr. Chairman,
Maraming salamat po. Yes, Congressman Barsaga.
just a suggestion, in order that the records would properly reflect kung sino ang mga sumasagot sa ating mga katanungan, pwede bang pakirequest natin sa mga kinatawan ng ABS-CBN na bago sumagot, sabihin ang kanilang pangalan, pati na ang tungkulin nila sa ABS-CBN.
All guests, all invited guests are requested to do so. Alam niyo po mga kasama,
point of
ang
order,
hearing
Mr.
po natin ay hanggang 6:00 lang at nakikita ko na po ang susunod na magtatanong na
Mr. Chair, the name of the one who replied prior to...
Yes.
yes, pangalan po ninyo, sir?
Herminio Ozaita Jr. Attorney po ako sa Romulo Law Office. I'm also counsel to ABS-CBN.
Maraming salamat po. Next, to interpolate, at sana po ito ay maikling interpolation lamang dahil lumagpas na po tayo sa oras natin na hanggang 6:00 lamang, 6:01 na po. And probably the last one to interpolate for today will be Deputy Speaker Dan Fernandez. You now have the floor.
Okay, maraming salamat Mr. Chairman at magandang gabi na po sa ating lahat, especially to all our resource speakers who have been invited in this joint congressional committee hearings. Alam nyo, pinag-uusapan natin po itong PDR, no? At kung isipin po ay parang napakahirap intindihin kung ano ibig sabihin ng Philippine Depositary Receipt. At kung tayo po ay simpleng mamamayan o ordinaryong mamamayan lamang, ay tunay na mahihirapan po tayong i-explain kung ano po itong PDR. And that's the reason why kanina ay tinatanong ni Congresswoman Bautista kung meron po tayong maipakikita na parang original na tinatawag nating Philippine Depository Receipt Certificate. At kanina po ay binigay ng ating secretariat yung ating pong sample ng tinatawag nating PDRC na kung saan ito po yung tinatawag nating underlying share na ibinebenta po sa mga Pilipino at non-Pilipino para maintindihan po ng ating mga ordinaryong tao o ordinaryong mamamayan. Ito po ay isang financial instrument na kung saan ay maaaring magamit ng ating pong mga non-Filipinos, especially mga non-Filipinos. But Filipinos can also buy this PDR on Philippine Stock Exchange or kaya ay tinatawag nating private placement. At ito po ay ginagamit ng ABS-CBN Holding Corporation na kung saan ang mostly na bumibili sa ating pong holding corporation under ABS-CBN ay yung ating pong mga foreign investor. At alam nyo, matagal na rin po itong PDR. Kumbaga, 1920 pa lang ay na-discover na to at naging popular lamang to sa Pilipinas noong 1999. As a matter of fact, ang ating pong ABS-CBN Holding Corporation have started to have this kind of PDR na kung saan sila po ang nag-i-issue. Maganda po ito sa atin dahil nga exactly nakita po natin na nagkaroon po tayo ng mga foreign investors, tumagdag ang negosyo, nagkaroon ng trabaho ang ating pong mga mamamayan, lumakas ang kita, tumaas ang ekonomiya. But still, nakita natin yung maganda epekto, but unfortunately, may mga problema that manifested during the execution of PDRs. Not because of the wrong implementation of PDRs, but on the previous practices that mass media company allegedly having a bias towards other news programs and some allegedly as well that ABS-CBN have become manipulators of political balances in the Philippines. Pero ako, I've been a part of ABS-CBN as well. Ako po ay a former actor in ABS-CBN. I've worked in ABS-CBN for 6 years. At I've experienced a lot of good things in ABS-CBN as well. True to their slogan, sinasabi nila, in the service of the Filipino people, ay nakita naman po natin yung mga magandang ginagawa ng ABS-CBN during calamities, typhoons, earthquakes, yung mga tinatawag natin volcanic eruption, ABS-CBN was there. Magaganda mga programa na ginagawa ng ABS-CBN. Nagpapaiyak, nagpapatawa, nagpapakilig sa ating mga kababayan. But it's always like this, merong two sides of a coin. At ang isa, maganda, at ang isa, hindi. Considering that there are allegations that during national election, yung slogan ng ating pong ABS-CBN ay parang nababago na in the service of ABS-CBN instead of in the service of the Filipino people. Those are the highly contentious and debatable issues. And I think we have to start by asking the ABS-CBN Holding Corporation some pertinent questions, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Alam natin that ibinibenta itong PDR. At sa pagbenta ng PDR, pag bumili ka, ano ang pamamaraan na ginagawa po ng ating pong mga holding corporation on selling the PDRs? The ABS-CBN Holding Corporation can answer this.
Mr. Chair, may I request that Attorney Ayo Bautista be recognized to answer the questions?
Yes, it's okay, as long as he belongs to the ABS-CBN Holding Corporation. Is he the lawyer of the holding corporation? Who is the lawyer of the holding corporation?
Si Attorney Quezon po.
Okay, go ahead. Sir.
Pakiulit po yung questions.
Ang tanong ko, di ba pag tayo po ay bumibili ng PDR, meron po tayong form on how to purchase eh. Di ba? For example, tayo po ay listed on a public, di ba? IPO. So, paano tayo bumibili? Bumibili ba tayo sa Philippine Stock Exchange? O tapos meron po tayong tinatawag na, alam mo, pagbultuhan ng bili, meron tinatawag dyan na parang private placement, di ba? So, ginawa po ba natin to dito sa ating holding corporation?
Mr. Chairman, noong 1999, nagkaroon ho tayo ng initial offering of...
Can you speak louder, Mr. Chairman?
Noong 1999, nagkaroon ho tayo ng initial offer ng PDRs. Ito ay in-offer ng ABS Holdings to the public. So doon ho nagsimula yung PDRs. But after that, you can buy PDRs from the market. You can approach any broker and ask a broker to buy the PDRs for you.
So lahat ng mga qualified brokers are allowed to sell the PDRs. Mag-i-issue lamang ang holding corporation ng kanilang PDRs at mahahawakan na nila yung kanilang certificate, di ba? Correct? If I'm correct, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, na-issue na ho yung PDRs ng ABS Holdings Corporation.
Okay.
And this is
All
being
right.
circulated in the market.
I understand. Okay. Is this a Philippine Deposit Receipt Certificate is also tantamount on saying that this is the pledge agreement that the subscriber and the ABS-CBN Holding Corporation hold in between the buyer and the seller of the PDR?
Your Honor, the pledge agreement is a separate
It's a different.
agreement. It's a different agreement. Your
Correct. Have you submitted the pledge of agreement in this honorable body?
No, Your Honor.
And that's the reason why I'm trying to find out dito po sa ating pong ABS Holding Corporation that you have given us. Hinahanap ko yung pledge of agreement that is specifically written dito po sa page number 6, ownership of shares and voting rights. But hindi ko po makita yung pledge of agreement. Can you kindly submit to us the pledge of agreement, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Your Honor.
And also the...
Excuse me, Deputy Speaker Dan Fernandez. The committee secretary is hereby directed to secure a copy of an authentic copy of the agreement.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Congressman Remulla.
We've been here for more than 5 hours already, and I think that it's just about proper that we take a break. We take a break from this And I think a good night's rest would help us digest all the facts in our minds. Because right now, Mr. Chairman, given all these questions, it's very hard to think of these very abstract principles involved due to the lateness of the hour. We've been at it for 5 hours already, and I hope that we can just do this on Thursday when we meet again. So that
Yes, Congressman Remulla, we will do it on Thursday. We'll just let Congressman D.S. Dan Fernandez finish his line of questioning.
Mr. Chairman, in line with your request, can we request for all PDRs, all types of PDRs that they have issued?
Okay,
And at the
the
same time,
committee
Mr. Chairman,
secretary is hereby directed to...
Mr. Chairman, in addition to that, because I'm trying to find out also the sa articles of incorporation, yung mga incorporators. Kasi parang hinahanap ko po dito, hindi ko po makita yung mga incorporators. Can the ABS-CBN Holding Corporation also submit the list of the incorporators of the holding company? Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, move
Inaatasan
to
po-
suspend, Mr. Chairman. Move to suspend.
Yes, hearing suspended.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Hearing resumed. Yes, Deputy Speaker Dan Fernandez, you
Mr.
still
Chair,
have the floor.
because of the persuasion of our elderly members of this committee, I would submit and I would yield my time on the next hearing that will be appointed by this honorable body. Thank
The
you, Mr.
chairman
Chairman.
recognize D.S. Dante Marcoleta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to beg your indulgence because I observed that ABS-CBN has been the subject of a cease and desist order. Very recently, coming from the National Telecommunications Communication. But apparently, Mr. Chair, they are still able to air their programs and contents using the Sky Cable Corporation. Sky Cable Corporation, Mr. Chair, has 10 channels. Channel 1, YEY, Channel 5, Knowledge, 7, Cinemo, 8, this is the regular program, stop na yun. Channel 9 is Jeepney, 11, O Shopping, 17, regular program, stop, 23, Mix, 26, Teleradio, 27, ANC. You probably can notice also, Mr. Chair, several of our colleagues, they continue to air their program through the Sky Cable. We are all aware of the fact that the franchise of Sky Cable Corporation, which is now owned by ABS-CBN, the franchise has expired as of March 30, 2020. The representative of NTC is here, Mr. Chair. I know that the transmitter in Bohol Avenue is the subject of a CDO, but I'd like to know on what authority Sky Cable is still airing their programs through this channel, despite the fact that the franchise, as the records will bear us all, it expired last March 30, 2020. Is the NTC aware of this, Mr. Chair? And if they are aware, why is it that they consented in airing the program, Mr. Chair?
Ito pong katanungan ni Deputy Speaker Marcoleta ay nakasama sa pamilya ng ibang katanungan, ngunit papayagan po ng chairman ng committee ito na sagutin ito ng NTC briefly, maikling kasagutan lamang po mula sa NTC dahil importante pong magkaroon ng klarifikasyon yung isyong ito. NTC, you're now recognized. Please answer the group of questions raised by Deputy Speaker Dante Marcoleta.
Narinig niyo po ba ako, Mr. Chairman?
Loud and clear po, NTC.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. As raised by Congressman Marcoleta, yun daw pong Sky Cable ay nakakapag-ere. Ang dahilan po niyan kasi, ang Sky Cable po ay may franchise, yung pong Central Cable TV, but noon pong panahon po ni President Aquino, ay nag-issue po siya ng Executive Order number 205, series of 1987. Doon po sa Section 1 of Executive Order number 205 ay tinanggal po doon, ang sabi po doon, Section 1, the operation of cable antenna television system in the Philippines shall be open to all citizens of the Philippines or to corporations, cooperatives, or associations wholly owned and managed by such citizens under a certificate of authority granted by the National Telecommunications Commission, hereinafter referred to as the Commission. Lumalabas po dito sa executive order na to ay parang tinanggal po ng executive order ang requirement ng prangkisa para po sa mga cable TV operators. And actually po, yung mga ibang cable TV operators ay pag nag-apply po sa amin ay wala naman po silang prangkisa na sinasubmit. At hindi na po sila kumuha ng prangkisa sa amin, sa legislative branch of government. Ang ginagawa po nila ay nag-incorporate lang po sila sa SEC at saka po nagsasubmit ng aplikasyon sa National Telecommunications Commission.
Maraming salamat po, Commissioner Liel Cordoba, para sa inyong paglilinaw. At kung makikita nyo po mga kasama, mukhang kailangan po nating amyendahan ng batas na ito upang maibalik ang kapangyarihan ng prangkisa dito sa ating kapulungan ng taong bayan.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Congressman Marcoleta.
Sinabi po ni Commissioner Cordoba na meron pong Executive Order 205. Tama po yun, Mr. Chair. Ito po ay panahon
point of
ni
order.
dating...
Yes, what is your point of order,
I thought
Deputy
we have
Speaker?
agreed that we will be adhering to the request of Congressman Remulla, considering that I still have the floor a while ago, but because of the persuasion of Congressman Boying Remulla, I
To my
adhere
knowledge,
to his request.
My
I would like to hear,
parliamentary inquiry was approved by the Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker Fernandez. I would like to hear the argument of Congressman Marcoleta.
This is true, Mr. Chair. There is Executive Order 205. This Executive Order was dated June 30, 1987, during the time of President Cory Aquino. But, Mr. Cordoba, you must realize that the Philippine 1987 Constitution was ratified on February 2, 1987. Meaning to say, the President of the Philippines lost already the making power kasi po under Freedom Constitution. As a matter of fact, Mr. Cordoba, I'd like to remind you that under Article 18, this is the transitory provision of our Constitution. Ang sabi po niya, all existing laws, decrees, executive orders, proclamations, letters of instructions, not inconsistent with this Constitution shall remain operative. Kung hindi inconsistent, ibig sabihin, dapat mananatili lamang siya kung kaugnay, kung consistent sa Constitution. Hindi po sila consistent. Why? Yung pong EO 205, ang sinasabi po roon, ang NTC ay magre-require ng Certificate of Authority to Operate. 15 taon lamang po yun. Hindi po yun ang ginamit ng Central TV, CITV o Central TV na ngayon Sky Cable. Ano po ang ginawa nila? Pumunta sila sa Kongreso para makakuha ng prangkisa. Ibig sabihin po, ang ginamit nilang authority ay yung prangkisang nakuha nila sa Congress, which expired last March 30, 2020. Bakit po, Mr. Cordova, sasabihin nyo ngayon na merong Executive Order 205? Hindi po yun. Nag-expire na po yung prangkisa. Hindi po yun ang authority kinuha ng Central TV. Ang kinuha po nila ay prangkisa from this Congress 25 years ago na nag-expire na po. Ang tanong ko po sa NTC, kung nalalaman po ninyo na nag-expire na, bakit po napapayagan pa po natin na mag-ere ng content at saka sa program using a facility whose franchise expired last March 30, 2020? Bakit po? Mr. Chair, point of order. Point of order, Mr. Chair.
What is your point of order?
Mr. Chair, malinaw po na meron tayong agenda na sinusunod. No? At nabanggit rin ng kagalang-galang na chair kanina, itong mga series na tanong na ito ay kabahagi ng ibang pag-uusapan sa mga darating na araw. So if you will allow the Honorable Marcoleta to propound interpellation questions as to those issues, I think hindi naman po nararapat yun. Dahil meron tayong mga kasamahan na
Mr.
dapat
Chair,
sana ay nagtanong sa usapin ng
napaka-material po ng
hearing
sinasabi
suspended
natin ngayon. Hearing resumed. Order. Hearing resumed. Sa susunod na hearing ko na po papayagang sumagot ang NTC and papayagan po natin na muli ay magbalik ang floor kay DS Dan Fernandez. At ang susunod po natin na hearing ay magaganap sa Thursday, 1 p.m. Same week po, ngayong panahong ito. Maraming salamat po. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, I move to suspend the session till next Thursday.
There is a motion.
Second.
Duly seconded. Motion is approved.
Habang tumatanda, nahihirapan na rin sumabay. Kaya ako nag-Anlin with MoveMax with 2 times more calcium for bones, high protein for muscles, and collagen for joints. Tuloy-tuloy ang mga sandaling kasama sila dahil may tuloy-tuloy na lakas at liksing Anlin.
Formal declaration of allegiance to a foreign state.
Sasabihin ko dyan.
Sinabi po, Congresswoman Bimbin, ni Mr. Lopez, na hindi siya nagtitake ng oath or made an affirmation or other formal declaration of allegiance to the Philippines. Marami pong Supreme Court decisions na nagtideklara that the act of renunciation must be categorical. At wala po siyang oath na binibigay dito sa Pilipinas. At yung pong effect nitong binasa ninyo ay